Hey legends, Blake here with another video, and today I want to talk about actually a rather large family of cichlids, one that has a few little things to keep in mind, but other than that you're going to get brilliant activity, brilliant colour and a heap of variety. So let's jump straight into today's video where I'm going to talk all about Tropheus care and breeding. Let's jump into it. So first off, I've got my own Tropheus, which I never do a breeding and care guide without having bred or cared for the fish at least. And mine are what are called Tropheus red molyro or red morii molyro. There's a couple of different names. And that's really important when talking about Tropheus because there are a whole bunch of them. Most commonly you're going to come across Tropheus du Bois, which are going to be that classic blue-black with a canary yellow stripe. Really stunning fish, but interestingly enough, as juveniles and fry, they're going to look a whole lot different. Typically what you're going to see as juvenile Tropheus are going to be a blue fish with white dots all over it. And it's a really fascinating transformation if you are lucky enough to be able to watch it happen. So there are a bunch of different Tropheus, and most commonly it's going to vary based on how narrow or wide the band of color is, whether that color is red, white, orange, yellow, and so forth, and where the Tropheus actually originate from. But rather than going through the full exhaustive list, I'll put a few little things on the screen now to make it clear visually. And the good news is that most of the Tropheus are going to have very similar care and breeding and dietary requirements. So Tropheus inhabit about 100 kilometer or 60 mile span of the Tanzanian or Burundian coastline. Typically in aquariums, they're known to live between about 5 to 8 years. However, in the wild or under extremely great conditions, they can live up to about a decade. In terms of appearance, while they do vary in color and patterning, most of them have quite a rounded face and that classic cichlid body shape. They're not the smallest cichlids going around. They'll get up to about 5 inches from tip to tail or 12.5 centimeters. So I'd recommend for a group of 6 or 8 at least a 4-foot aquarium, or what I believe is called a 55 gallon. Males and females are incredibly difficult to determine when it comes to Tropheus, so that's why I'd always recommend a decent group. And being an African cichlid, they are going to have a little bit of aggression as well, so that larger group's going to help to disperse that. If you are going to try and tell the difference between males or females, while it is very difficult and an inexact science, males are going to have deeper coloration, larger lips and a more upturned sort of face, whereas females are going to be a little bit more faded in terms of coloration, a bit smaller as well perhaps. But if it is really critical, then you can determine it from venting them. Venting fish is kind of a whole different topic, so I'm not going to get into how to do that today, but if you are interested, then it is a great way to actually determine the gender or sex of a cichlid without just kind of having a best guess. Now in terms of temperament, as I mentioned, they are an African cichlid, so Tropheus are going to squabble, they might lip lock, they might chase each other all the way around the tank, so I'd recommend having a nice rocky outcrop of base rock or limestone, something that's going to provide a higher pH for them, as well as plenty of nooks and crannies where they can set up different territories, especially if you only have areas where there's really 1 or 2 really great territories. Then males are going to fight tooth and nail to get that best spot to give them the best hopes of breeding. I've personally found my Tropheus to be really quite shy and skittish, and that's why for a lot of the footage that you'll see as we progress through this video, I have been nowhere near the tank at the time. But I think if you had a larger group, then you would find that they'd be a bit more outgoing, as with any shoaling or schooling fish. I have a relatively small group of 7 or 8. I can understand why they would be that way. I keep mine species only, as I do with a lot of my fish, especially since I'm hoping to breed them more often than not. But if you did want tank mates for Tropheus, some great ones include sardine cichlids such as Cyprochromis, Julidochromis and other rock-dwelling Tanganyikans as well, and even some of the shell dwellers. Do be careful though, because one thing that is notorious with Tropheus is bloating. Tropheus really don't want too much protein in their diet. They do tend to blow up like hot air balloons. So if you are going to keep them with a more meat-eating cichlid, then that might be an issue because they might inadvertently eat some of that more high-protein food. So definitely consider that before adding protein-heavy tank mates into their tank. Temperature-wise, 22 to 28 degrees Celsius or 72 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit is a good range for these guys. High pH, 7.8 to 9.0, definitely above 7, nothing acidic for these guys whatsoever. Tropheus are not plant safe, so you might have success with some Java fern perhaps, or maybe some Vallisneria, but everything else is pretty much out of the ballpark. And yes, these fish are a bit on the larger side and very, very active swimmers. As well as that, they tend to sort of zip around, so the more room the better. I've got them in a temporary situation in a larger 2-foot aquarium, but for the long term you're going to want to upgrade them to at least sort of a 55 or 75 gallon tank or a 4-foot by 18-inch aquarium. Now, whilst I mentioned Tropheus and their likelihood to bloat, you can sparingly feed them mysis shrimp. You can even give them seaweed and other vegetables as well that they'll really enjoy. In the wild, they are technically a omnivore, but they survive on a product called ulfs, which is kind of just the debris and muck that is in Lake Tanganyika. So yeah, they don't really like any crude proteins, so that's why a protein-based pellet is typically not the go for these guys. Now when it comes time to breed your Tropheus, you're going to want to keep a ratio of about 1 male to every 4 or 5 females. They're a maternal mouth breeder, which means that the female is going to pick up the eggs into her mouth and she's going to juggle them around in there for a period of about 2 weeks. In terms of a single clutch, that can be about 5 to 15 eggs at one time, so they're not that prolific, and it can be a really stressful time as well during that period. So since her mouth is going to be full of eggs, she's not really going to take to food. You'll probably visibly see her chin be quite extended as she's trying to carry all these eggs around, and she might be prone to bullying. It's also important not to stress her too much at this point, or she will inadvertently swallow the eggs as a defense mechanism. For those reasons, some people like to separate the female into another aquarium, although you have to be really, really careful doing so, so that you don't make a bit of a mess of it and stress her out too much, leading to that egg swallowing that I just mentioned. In my case, I've been pretty lucky, and the females have just naturally spat the fry out as soon as they have been mature enough to be free swimming, and that's why I've got a few little babies in my tank, which I'm really excited about. If you're too nervous about it, or it's an early clutch and you really want to keep an ongoing population of your Tropheus, what you can typically do is catch the female out, hold her mouth open until she spits out the eggs. If they're not developed yet, you can put them in an egg tumbler and tumble them around until they reach maturity, and then you can let them out and feed them brine shrimp and things like that immediately. But other than that, it's best to at least let her hold until they are sort of at the free swimming stage, and then you can maybe get her to spit the fry out and raise them elsewhere. Overall, for a newcomer to Tropheus, there are a few pitfalls that they will inevitably stumble into, but if you've watched this video to this point, you'll know to avoid those proteiny foods, to have heaps of rocky areas for territories, to try for way more females than males, and other than that, you should have a great time with them, and they'll reward you with some really nice natural behavior and color, and overall is just another great fish to have kept. So hopefully you liked this video, and hopefully you found it helpful. If you did, it always helps me out to smash like, hit subscribe, and all that fun stuff. And I always recommend, if you do have any further questions, please drop them down below, and I try to answer every single one. And hopefully, if you are having one of those burning questions, it's already been answered down there as well. So yeah, thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.